what is your skill set and how does that match with what the market is willing to pay for it today? Right. I think we get caught a lot in these like debates on, gosh, a teacher should be worth more than a whatever, right? And in many ways, I agree with that. But there is a reality of how value is structured in today's society, and can you accept that reality and match it with your skill set and understand based on how you're currently presenting your personal brand to the world, the world is valuing you at a certain rate, right? And not that you can change, and not that you shouldn't change it, because I believe you really can, but getting kind of clear on that is really important. And then I would recommend, if you wanted to take it another step further, bring in some coaches into your life and some mentors and say, hey, how can I elevate my value proposition, my brand to the world so that people are willing to pay me more money?
Brandon Green, my friend, it is good to have you on here. I'm excited for this conversation. Thank you for being on the Better Wealth Show.
Caleb, thank you for having me. I am very pleased to be here as well. I am a loyal follower of your content and love the contribution you make to the world.
So it's fun. Your website is very well laid out, and you've accomplished a ton. And so it was funny when we got on before recording. I'm like, what do you want to talk about? We could talk about college. We could talk about wealth. We could talk about branding. We could talk about living intentionally and how you're doing that today. Before we jump into all those fun and exciting topics, why don't you give our audience a little bit of backstory on who you are,
Sure.
why you're so passionate about what you're doing, and just give us a little bit of context on why you're on the show.
Yeah, sure. So I was born in a small mining town in Wyoming called Rock Springs. Grew up in a very conservative Mormon household. And I watched as my parents really struggled with money. My father decided that he wanted to pursue higher education, and he ended up going on to get his doctorate degree in Iowa, which the family eventually moved there. And I was able to see how he, through education, was able to change the social economic trajectory of our life, which I thought was really interesting because he came from a very, very poor background with multiple brothers and sisters, barely any indoor plumbing. And so I had an experience early on of going from a fairly middle-class background with my father as a principal of a school in Rock Springs, Wyoming. And then we moved to Ames, Iowa, where he pursued his doctorate. And we moved into a small trailer in a really kind of rundown trailer court. And so early on, I was like present to this question of what does it mean to be poor, wealthy, middle class, have money, not have money. And that really started to inform a lot of things as I grew. So fast forwarding a few years. So eventually I ended up graduating from high school and deciding not to go to college. It was less of a like strategic choice, like I'm not going to college, and more of a this doesn't feel like a fit for me. So can I punt it to the future and maybe someday I'll go, which led me to touring the world with a musical organization. That's a whole nother side conversation. And then eventually landing in Washington, D.C. and getting into the real estate business as a real estate agent. I had no money, no prospects, no college degree. And yet I felt like I had good people skills and an interest in real estate. And I thought, well, let me try to make a go of it. And so I started my career door knocking Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. to build a real estate practice. And so I did that for 20 years. Fast forward to today.
By the way, if you're not watching this on YouTube, you don't look like you're 35, by the way. So,
wow, that's very nice.
You age incredibly well.
Oh, thank you. It's all about face cream and good lighting. So today, just fast forwarding, and we can get into different parts of the journey. I consider myself a serial entrepreneur, which is something I'm very proud of, and an investor. Yeah. And I'm excited about how through my company, the Alchemy of Money, we're able to bring opportunities to people who don't traditionally have them. And we're doing all kinds of exciting projects as a result. So still in the real estate space, but also doing a lot of other things that touch hospitality and technology as well.
Man, I appreciate the overview. I want to talk about the philosophy, the framework of wealth, because I think you and I both agree that there's a lot of shiny object syndrome in our space.
Yes.
And it's like, I don't
Yes.
want to beat up Robert Kiyosaki. I love his work, but he's like, he almost makes it sound like you go buy a house, you'll be financially free.
Right.
And
Right.
it's like, there's some steps that need to go in between the mindset and the taking action and being financially free. I also want to
Yes.
talk about just the real estate in right now, what your thoughts
Mhm.
are, and then I'm excited to also talk about some opportunities that your community brings to the person that might not have the super connections in the space. But before that, I want to talk about college. And we talked a
Yes.
little bit about this before starting to record. You didn't go to college, and how many years ago was that? Was that like 20 years ago when you decided not to go?
Right. Yes.
Was that
Or
was
more.
that pretty like taboo for
It
your
was.
family?
It was. And now, as I mentioned just a moment ago, my father decided to pursue a doctorate in philosophy. He was a principal and then a superintendent, and for him, education was the path out.
Yeah.
And so, big believer, right, in the power of education. To their credit, my parents' credit, though, I think they saw early on in high school, as I started to have these various entrepreneurial ventures going on, mowing lawns, raising money, selling chocolate Santa Clauses and Easter bunny. Like, I think they probably recognized I was more of an entrepreneur. So they didn't put an enormous amount of pressure on me to go to college. It was more of a like one eyebrow, like, what? You're not going to
Yep.
college thing. And so that helped, I think, and given me some freedom
Right.
to not just go down the proven traditional path, but to take a detour to this, world tour, which gave me time to think a little bit and get to know myself better, and ultimately end up not going to college.
Yeah, I think and I would love to talk just quickly about the pros and cons because there's a lot of people in our community that are starting to think differently.
Yes.
And early on, it's like this is what you're gonna do. Even I mean, I was homeschooled, man, oldest of six kids. We
Hey.
thought outside the box, but college was very much of like you're gonna go and we're gonna. I mean, I graduated in 3 years, lived at home. It was a total of $21,000 that we spent. So it was like credit to my parents, like thought outside the box. We checked the box, but it was like there was no going around that box.
Yeah.
And so, but
Right.
then as I reflect and as I just look at the world and look at, where corporate America is right now, I'm starting to see a shift. And it really comes down to the opportunity cost of not just money, but your 3 to 4 to 5 years that you're spending potentially not furthering your relationship capital depending on what choices you make. And so it's
Yes.
just an interesting conversation. I've had people on both sides of the aisle that are very passionate about their belief. What would you say to the parent, or what would you say to the 18 or 19-year-old kid who has this
Mhm.
drive, wants to do something, doesn't want to regret a decision, and is like could easily go through college and crush it, but is feeling a little bit uneasy? Like what questions or what framework would
Yes.
you give them on how to have a conversation?
Well, I had a fascinating conversation the other day with a good friend of mine who we were on the way to the airport together on a business trip. She runs a very successful organization, and she has kids that are entering that college age. And she said, I don't know what to do, Brandon, because on one hand, as a mom, I'm like, they're going to college and they're going to go to a great university, and we're going to spend a ton of money on that. On the other hand, she said, as an executive, I don't care where anybody went to college or even if they did. When I hire someone, I'm looking to see what their track record of performance is, what their attitude is, what their personality and personal skills are. So she said, I'm living this nightmare where in my business, I don't care what college you went to, but as a parent,
Yeah.
I'm like, you need to go to a brand name university. And I think that tees up beautifully the conundrum facing our society right now. And it's because college and universities have a brand issue where people are now seeing that the return on investment isn't necessarily matching like they expect it would be. So to your question of what would you do? I think something that is important to evaluate for teenagers or young people thinking about college is, to the best of their ability, can they reconcile the type of career trajectory and the financial opportunities associated with it with the cost of that 4 year degree. For example, if you're going to get a liberal arts degree and you want to go into teaching and education, an honorable role, and the best you're going to be able to do is make $60,000 to $100,000 then why the heck are you spending $60,000 a year at a high institution? You're going to be buried in debt.
Yep.
So I wish, and I would want there to be an ROI conversation happening,
Yes. Thank you.
And not the sort of the this or that. I think we take a very nuanced issue and say, yay for college or no. No. It should be more of an evaluation of based on the person's skill set, abilities, desire, and ROI for what they think they most likely would achieve financially, make a strategic choice. So, I mean, that's one school of thought. I think, if I had an 18-year-old, 17, 16-year-old, that would be the conversation I would be having right now.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would maybe tweak with that, and it helps with the conversation, is saying there's other things that we can value other than money.
Yes, that's right.
But you're totally true. If you love art, like, you don't have to go to a 4-year college to do art. It's just one of those things where now I think it's starting to, we can start having conversations and get really clear on what people want. And I love the ROI calculator. If that is not a thing already, if one of our listeners, or if you want to partner with me, let's go and make a college ROI conversation calculator, because I think it will just really help someone get really clear on what they want to do.
Yes, let me make one other comment on this, because I can now see in hindsight what I missed as a result of not going to college. That if somebody's thinking about that, they should be very aware of this. Besides education, the most powerful thing in going to college is the network.
Yes.
And the relationships. And so if you choose not to do that traditionally through a 4-year institution, you're going to have to recreate it another way. And so I can see when I began my career, I started 3 or 4 steps backwards, not because I thought my writing skills were less or math or whatever. Maybe they were, I don't know. But I didn't have the relationships or the networks of my college buddies to lean on to succeed and to network and advance. And I've had to create that myself purposefully over the last 20 years. So think about that are you a natural networker? Then you'll probably figure it out. If you're not a natural networker, you may need to go into the structure of an institution to force you to develop those relationships so that you can then have them when you're 30, 40, or 50, and your buddy is now the Secretary of State somewhere, right? So that's the other thought, I think, on relationships.
The last thought I'll have, this is fun. We weren't even going to talk about this, but that's why I love these conversations, is I have friends that aren't going to college, but they're not doing anything with their life. So it's like, I love college if it's pushes you to actually do something that's outside your comfort zone, because just staying in your parents' basement, playing video games, like you could say, oh, college isn't worth it. Well, it would be, because it would take you out of that environment. So overall, everyone's in a different situation. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, let's talk about wealth frameworks.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of just asking people that I respect, how do you think about money? How do you think about money from a standpoint of your time, your potential, the decisions you make from start to finish? So I'm just going to let you riff a little bit, and we can have a conversation about frameworks and money.
So for the first several years of my career, I was really good at making money, and yet I was always behind, right? I ended up getting in debt with the IRS 2 times, horrible, really miserable process. And always just felt like, wow, I'm making a lot of what appears to be great money, but I always didn't feel like I had enough. And what I realized later in hindsight was that there's actually, in developing great wealth, 3 distinctly different but connected skill sets that you have to procure somewhere along the way. First is you do have to get the skill set of actually making money, right? Like you have to have gross revenue, either through your job or through your business, but somehow you have to figure out, how do I match my skills, time, resources, and abilities to generate this thing called cash, right? And that's a skill set. That's a networking skill set. It's an articulation skill set. It's a sales skill set. It's putting together a resume skill set. All of that is a skill set, but it's in one bucket called making money. If you do that, and that is definitely step number 1. And by the way, mindset is a big part of that, because if you don't feel like you've got the personal confidence to convey your value to the world, it'll be difficult for people to pay you for that value. So mindset's certainly in there. Then next, you need to go to saving money, right? The discipline around creating a delta between what you make and how much you spend on your lifestyle. That right there is its own set of skill sets and can be a life journey for people. And you hear the interesting stories of people that, the janitor that never made more than $40,000 a year, but retired with millions of dollars. Well, it's because and this is in, I think, the Psychology of Money book by Morgan Housel. I think it's in that.
One of my favorite books, by the way. Love that book.
Sitting right there.
Yep.
It's because he created a big delta between what he was spending and what he was making, right? Mm-hmm. If he hadn't done that, it never would have worked, which leads to the third skill set, which is investing. You do have to develop the skill set around investing to multiply your money by using time and money to multiply money first, which is where almost everybody starts unless you have a trust fund. And then eventually you can use money to multiply money. But most people need to figure out how to use time and money to multiply their money, use their personal energy, time commitment, skills, networks, et cetera, to amplify what they're actually investing in, to give it a good kicker versus putting it in a traditional stocks, bonds, mutual funds with your financial planner where you're going to get a conservative 8% return. Very hard to get wealthy with that as your only investment strategy. You've got to figure out how do you deploy your time and money to make more money. And that's then the third bucket. So what I discovered over time was, these are three different skill sets. And you can see it with people. Some are good at one and not the other two, or some are good at saving, but they hardly make anything and they don't know how to invest, right? Or some are great at investing, but they make a bunch of money and then they lose it. And then they make it and then, Yep. So if I'm listening to this right now, I would be doing a personal assessment to say, between making, saving, and investing, how would I rate myself on a scale of 1 to 10? And that would give me some clarity on where I might need to go next in order to shore up this big circle here we call wealth building.
I love that. Each category, it's interesting because our framework is I draw a human being and you got to know thyself. And ultimately, yes, you as your greatest asset are responsible for a lot. Like you can get out of a lot of holes by just making more money. And I think if you look at America in general, majority of America has, a making money problem. A lot of our friends have a keeping money problem. They make a lot of money, but it's like, where did it go? And then it seems like investing is one of those things where it's just hard to master. So I'll take my parents, for example. They're frugal, but they probably would rate themselves lower on a scale of investing because they're doing fine, but they're not really into it, looking for alternative assets and all that. They just are good savers. And so I've just I didn't grow up in a home where we were always looking for investment deals. When we talk about each category, when we talk about generating or making money, any books that you recommend, any questions that are good? I know you talked a little bit about confidence. What is a secret hack that you have to help someone really get clear about where they're at, number one, and number two, how they can maximize this area?
Yeah. So I think the assessment of where you're at is an honest look at what is your skill set and how does that match with what the market is willing to pay for it today, right? I think we get caught a lot in these debates on, gosh, a teacher should be worth more than a whatever, right? And in many ways, I agree with that. But there is a reality of how value is structured in today's society, and can you accept that reality and match it with your skill set and understand, based on how you're currently presenting your personal brand to the world, the world is valuing you at a certain rate, right? And not that you can change, and not that you shouldn't change it, because I believe you really can, but getting kind of clear on that is really important. And then I would recommend, if you wanted to take it another step further, bring in some coaches into your life and some mentors and say, hey, how can I elevate my value proposition, my brand to the world so that people are willing to pay me more money? I'll give you a really interesting example. Just yesterday, I engaged a new attorney for a deal that I'm working on, $780 an hour, which is one of the highest bill rates I've seen for an attorney. Right. And I was like, but I didn't even hesitate, right? I've signed the agreement because who referred him to me and my brief interaction and the value he provided to me on this deal, I was like, it's worth the $780 an hour. Every other attorney I'm dealing with is between $250 and $500 an hour. What makes him worth $750 an hour or more? take that same example and parallel it back down to where you are and say, what am I currently getting and how do I incentivize or enhance that? Now, that's from a very personal standpoint. For entrepreneurs, it's a lot more about, all right, how do I either maximize the margin in every customer transaction I have today? Yep. And that's a lot about efficiencies, expense management, personnel, and or how do I grow the business? Because in many businesses, the further you scale, you can flatten your expense margin and increase your profit margin. I mean, that's a very nuanced conversation depending on the businesses. But that's where I'd be looking, right? If I wanted to maximize my skill set, my business opportunities to make more money.
Any books that you recommend on the subject?
The books. So one of my favorite books in real estate, because I'm a real estate guy, right, is the Millionaire Real Estate Agent by Gary Keller. So anybody who's in real estate or anybody who's in small service businesses, the principles in that book are timeless in how to run a really good and profitable small business, service business enterprise. It's an excellent book.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off of what you're saying. 100% agree on the value proposition. Sometimes it can be tricky because you can feel like you bring a lot of value. Everyone's valuable, by the way. I don't know if someone needs to hear that, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the market, everyone values a little bit different. So if we want to maximize our wealth, we first of all need to look at ourselves, and then we have to look at, our time, other things that we can generate like in business, and just ask the question, is this creating value for other people? Because if it is, money will follow. I think Elon Musk had a tweet the other day about, money following value. And it's just interesting. And it's definitely something very good to think about.
Yeah, and just one other comment on that, because I can still feel a little like 30,000 feet. I would say the people that make the most money are really, really, really good at a very narrow set of things, right? And that takes time. So choosing early on, like, what am I going to be really, really good at can create an enormous amount of value higher than your colleagues. This attorney, a good example, right? He only does certain kind of equity and real estate deals. That's all he does from a legal field. He's the guy for that. Didn't happen overnight, but now 20 years later or whatever, he's $780 an hour.
Are you a fan of Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich?
Think and Grow Rich is a great book. It was probably the first foundational book I read where I said, oh, how I think about myself and the world plays some sort of role in my ability to generate external things. Yep. And then I went down a multi-year rabbit hole around what's that all about.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent book.
Yeah, he breaks down the difference between general knowledge and specialized knowledge.
Yes,
and I think it's again it's just an interesting, goes a little bit deeper on that, and it can be a powerful mind exercise. Let's talk about saving money. I love that you talk about this, by the way, because a lot of people say make money, invest money, and you talk about, and you use the word delta. The difference between saving and consuming. Why don't you break that down? And is there any good resources, questions, or something that you did in your life that helped you increase that delta of savings?
So the best thing I did in my life in creating some space between what I was making and what I was spending on my lifestyle was I got on the same page with my husband about money. Right? So, my personal journey was we've been together for 15 years now, and he has a very different mindset around money. And I think most couples have this thing going on, right? And for a long time, I fought that. But then I was like, wait a minute, we're on the same team. Right. How do we get on the same page about money, spending? I like experiences. He likes things, right? And if you're doing experiences and things, it's very difficult to sort of manage that. So we actually went to therapy for a year just on this issue. Like, how do we get on the same page? It was singularly the most important thing that we did, that I did, that he did to create that difference, because then everything else flowed from it. Then we started to have the conversation around, all right, we have a lifestyle that we like. How do we secure that? How much does that lifestyle actually cost? Yeah. Right. We love to go on great trips. We love to fly business or first class. There are things we like, nice things, but we had to sort of come to an agreement on what were the parameters of those nice things, because it's an insatiable desire to have more and more and more and more nice things. So we had to say, let's lock and load in this box, which is a great box, by the way. Be happy with that. and then allow everything else above that to go into the future. So, that's my one thing I would say, if you're in a relationship, is getting on the same page.
Yeah, and I love that, because if you can't be on the same page, that's why the divorce rate is so high in this country, and it can be almost impossible, and it can be very suffocating. Is there any practical things that you did from a standpoint of like, all right, you guys got on the same page, who won? Like, did you just now better communicate from a standpoint of experiences and
Well,
things? Because a lot of times what happens with the couples, with what I see, is one's a spender, one's not, and you
right,
have this like negative energy that goes
right.
on, and someone is there's just it's just not helpful. So how does that person or that couple have that conversation? And is
Right.
there anything practical or in any books that you'd recommend in this category that would help you from a standpoint of like, okay, we're on the same page, this is practically how we're going to save more?
Well, I don't know that I have any books on this, but I'll tell you what we practically did is we developed a personal profit and loss statement for the household. So we all have it in business, right? But
Yes.
we put a we said let's treat our personal life like a business. Not in the way that, the personal life is generating profit per se, but let's have all of our income and all of our personal expenses clarified, documented, categorized, and a report produced
Yep.
every month, so that we can look at it together as a couple and go through it and be like, oh, I didn't know I was spending that on that, or I didn't know you were spending that on that, or I thought we canceled that subscription. Let's get
Yeah.
that canceled. So it sounds a little bit dry, but it was like data transparency.
I'm telling
Saved
you.
our marriage.
I'm telling you guys, if you track your money, you control it.
Yes.
A lot of times you don't have to come up with super fancy systems if you're just
Yes.
aware. We
If you're
in our
just aware.
company,
Yes.
in our
Yes.
company, we have a daily huddle, and we tell each other what we're going to do, and we actually don't have a way to keep people accountable, but just the ability to verbalize each day where you're at keeps you accountable, because you have to go before someone. And the same thing goes with your money, is if all
Yes.
you do is if there's just a system to
Mhm.
have a conversation about what's going on, that solves so many issues. And so I would just encourage everybody, whether you're single or whether you're in a relationship, to have a system where you're tracking your money, because you will be way more aware of that.
Open a QuickBooks file and create a profit and loss statement for your personal income and expenses. And you will quickly see how much money you're actually spending on Starbucks, and those 4 subscriptions to this, that, and
Yeah.
the other that you thought you canceled 2 years ago that are still active. Or in my case, this is a funny story on this. We're going through the reports and our little, couple meeting, and I saw our grocery bill like really high. I was like, this is weird, because we don't cook and we order out all the time. Why is the grocery bill so high? So I get into the details, and I realized that I had given instructions to my cleaning lady, who does a lot of our grocery shopping, to always have fresh blueberries in the house so I could have my protein shakes. Well, what I was not present to was A, how many blueberries I was consuming, and B, how expensive fresh blueberries were. So all of a sudden, I'm spending like $80 a week on blueberries,
Oh my
and
goodness.
and then like freezing them. So the most expensive possible protein shake in the world. But my self-correcting mechanism kicked in. I was like, A, that's too many blueberries. B, that's too much money to be
Yep.
spending on blueberries.
Yeah. No,
Right.
I'm telling
So
you. Yep.
everybody has their blueberry, right? And so
Yep.
what is it? And I think having that profit and loss statement will show it to you, and your
Yep.
self-correcting mechanism will go, wait a minute, that's too much. And then you'll start to create that delta I talked about.
I love it. Everybody has those blueberries. I love it. Let's talk about investing, and I want this to
Yes.
also. I want you to be able to talk about what you guys are doing,
Great.
because they're twofold. Number one, just framework to investing, and I'll open this up by saying I talk to so many people that have no clue why they're doing what they're doing. Like,
Right.
just straight up, I'll ask someone, "Why do you have a 401k?" And they literally will say, "My CPA told me I should have a 401k." And
Right.
so I'm not saying it's a good or bad. I'm just saying very few people can translate or communicate or articulate why they have certain assets. And I think that's a
Right.
huge problem. So number one, I want you to talk about the framework. Number two, I want you to talk about what you guys are up to, because I think you guys are putting together a community and network that a lot of my audience would be very interested in learning about.
Great. Great. So my thesis on investing is that you can have 3 pillars, and probably shouldn't have any more than that for most people, unless they're investors full time, right? But for most people who have other things going on, it's 3 pillars. Pillar one are your traditional vehicles that your father told you about or your CPA insists upon. 401ks, IRAs, they are good vehicles. They do help on a tax front. You're not going to get wow, eye-popping returns, but there's some good reason to put a little bit of money, depending on your age and what your access to other stuff is, into those vehicles. Everybody has access to them, and they're set up for a reason. So I think pillar one is take a look at let's say you had $100. How much of that $100 are you going to put into a traditional vehicle? Not to be construed as investment advice, but what I would say is that percentage would depend on two things. One, your age, and two, the access you have to other stuff, right? It might be more interesting from a return perspective. Pillar one. Pillar two, choosing one investment area that you are going to develop specialized expertise in. So that might be real estate. That's what I chose, right? Then you have to go, is it residential or commercial? Like, what are you going to be great at, where you're obsessed over how to make that investment area work? I think one mistake people make, big mistake, is they invest in a bunch of stuff they don't really actually understand in hopes that they're going to get rich quick, right? And that rarely works, if ever. And instead, I'd say develop an expertise in a vertical. And make it a lifelong commitment. I'm going to be really, really good at X, and that be pillar two. The better you get at it, the more of your overall investment allocation you're going to want to put in it, because it's your thing, because you're now leveraging your money, but you're also leveraging and amplifying the investment because of your time and expertise and your unique perspective in that vertical.
Can I ask what type of verticals? Like, are we talking like real estate, trading?
So it could be real estate, commercial, or residential. If it's commercial, it could be as segmented as like warehouse, industrial, or office, or commercial hospitality, multifamily, right? What do you storage units, right? You get really, really good at one vertical within commercial, or commercial itself with a couple little nuances. Can be, if we go residential, then it could be single family homes, or it could be, duplexes or triplexes. Like, what is your thing? It can also be focused geographically. Like, I know the market in Maryland, Washington, D.C. Like, I know that market really, really, really well. Team me up an investment in California, it's going to be a lot harder for me to analyze it, but I can give you some unique insight in Washington, D.C., right? So as a focus area. Then the third is, I would say, stuff you want to play with and learn about, that you could lose all your money in that category and not set you back. So for me, that is venture capital investing in technology companies. I am interested in the space. I want to have some money deployed there, but I do not know how to vet great technology company opportunities. I might argue nobody does, but I certainly don't. And so I invest in a technology-driven venture capital fund that has a team of people who have a track record of making good bets on that. But I also know that if I lose all that money, it's not going to affect the other stuff I'm doing. So this is your more speculative category. This might be cryptocurrency. This might be NFTs. This is like, I'm trying to place a bet on the table knowing that 1 out of 20 is going to hit it, but the other 19 could very well go to zero. And that's okay. But a smart person would say, I'm not going to invest 100% of my investment opportunity dollars into that space, because that's crazy from a risk standpoint. And I see a lot of people doing that. Or they'll say, I'm just going to like throw out a bunch of dollars to a lot of different things. I'll put some in crypto. I'll put some in multiple cryptocurrencies. I'm going to buy an NFT. Let's figure out what that is. I'm going to put it no, that's not a strategy. That's just gambling. Right. So, so that's how I think about it. The pillars: traditional vehicles, your specialty item, and then an area that you're willing to be more speculative around, and balance your percentage of investment dollars accordingly.
I love it, man. Can you share with us from a percentage standpoint where you have your assets in each bucket? I would put my money on number 2 being probably where you hold the most, but I'm very open to how do you see all three of these pillars?
It's sort of like almost, it's like 70 or 80, 10 and 10, right?
Okay,
10% is going in these speculative, what I consider speculative.
yep.
Gosh, if I get lucky, 1 out of 20 is going to make it and give me a nice return area, only 10%. And I keep my allocation of traditional vehicle 401k IRA investing to about 10, maybe 15% as well. Okay. The rest is going for me in commercial real estate and hospitality oriented stuff.
Yep.
Because I know that's what I know.
And I just want to point out that that's you have that system set up because of your specialized knowledge, and you've been a master at your craft. Let me ask you this: when it comes to investing in yourself, yes, would you allocate pillar 2 if you're early on? Could you justify saying, hey, I'm going to save money, but I'm going to actively invest in coaching, or I'm going to actively invest in something so that translates into specialized knowledge? Like, could you justify that by saying I'm going to invest in pillar 2 by investing in myself?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have over the years spent possibly now 7 figures in coaching and consulting and paid mentors. And I've made a continue every day, make huge capital investments in my own knowledge and understanding and evolution. 100%.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same.
That's a huge thing.
Not up to 7 figures yet, but I probably have spent almost $200,000 or more to date on just my personal development. And some people will hear that, they go, oh my goodness, like, how is that even possible? And I'm just so grateful for the mindset shifts and for that. And I've seen a multiple return on investment from those decisions. Let's talk about the community and network that you're building.
Sure.
And I'll just tee it up by saying, a lot of times in this space, if you don't know someone, you miss out on big opportunities. And I think you're doing something pretty innovative in a way to maybe bridge the gap from the elite versus the people that want to get into those deals but may not know a person.
Right. So I find myself in such an interesting position now where I have a lot of very wealthy and incredibly successful friends and colleagues because of what I've been able to achieve. And then I have a lot of other people too that are successful in their own right, but they're trying to get to make more money. So I feel like I'm like this bridge between different worlds. And so, in the last few years, I've been thinking, well, what do I do about that? And so I launched an organization called the Alchemy of Money, which started as an education company where I developed a course and documents and materials and said, look, if you want to learn about small business finance, this is really focused on entrepreneurs, then you take my course, right? And that actually went really, really well. But what I discovered in that was education isn't actually enough, actually. You need access because most people don't have access to these other verticals I'm talking about. Like, they have access, everybody has access to the public markets. Anybody could go, set up a brokerage account and invest in stock. But you don't, like, who's getting access to that $13 million warehouse configuration? Private networks. Who's getting access to that venture capital fund that's investing in 20 different tech companies, 2 of which are probably going to make it big? Private networks. So as part of the Alchemy of Money, I said, great, we're also going to be an investment club. And I'm going to bring the opportunities I see and come to me to the table for the people, the members of the Alchemy of Money community, to invest in or not. And I'm 100% transparent on whether I'm putting in money or I'm not, and why that would be. And, we, unlike traditional, funds, this isn't an investment fund. I'm not charging, big fees. No, it's designed to bring access to deals to the community that are committed to growing their financial capacity through education, training, and networking. What's interesting is happening now is other people in the community are bringing opportunities into the network. So it's starting to really roll down the road where we're helping each other figure things out and bring opportunities to the group.
Do you have to be accredited to be a part of this?
You have to be accredited to participate in the deals.
Okay. You
do not have to be accredited to be part of the Alchemy of Money community. The educational component, you get access to all of that. As a matter of fact, my thought was great because, how do you become an accredited investor? Well, you need to get better with money. And so the education component really helps build people up. So you can see and get access to all of the documents and the conversations. You just can't invest your capital until you become an accredited investor.
Yep. You are who you hang around. So pick your communities well. And And so how can people find out more about this and join this community?
Yes, go to brandongreen.com, my website, and click on wealth building. And that's where you're going to find the information about the community.
How do I get a easier last name like Green?
Yes,
I can't do
exactly.
that. I can't say go to calebwilliams.com because no one knows how to spell my last name.
Right, yes.
So
Yes, I know. Thanks to my Irish ancestors who came across in the 1700s and kept the name Green.
right. So brandongreen.com
Yes,
and
like the color,
yes, I
GREEN
love
dot
it.
com. Click on wealth building, and you can get access to join the community and just learn, hang out, and be part of what we're up to in this conversation. And if you're in a position to, then we're my original commitment was 1 or 2 great investments a year. That's turning out to be a lot more. And so we'll see where this goes, but we're excited about it.
The cool thing about a community like that is it creates leverage because you are stronger together. So you can get better deals if it's not just you, but you now have a
Yes.
community behind you, and vice
Yes.
versa. The community can get in on better deals because of the community,
Yes.
and so it is
That's
it
a
is
great point.
it's
That's a
a
great point.
it's
As a matter of fact, we're working one today where the minimum threshold is $250,000.
yeah
Well, but we're able to bundle the
yeah
$250,000 as a group and get
great
in.
example. It's a
Yeah,
great example.
that's a really
Um,
good.
Anything else that you want to say? I always end the podcast with a legacy question, but is there anything else you want to talk about from college to making more money, saving, investing, what you're seeing in the real estate world right now? Like, I very much appreciate experts coming on and really being generous with their time and sharing the good, the
Yes.
bad that you're seeing right now.
I want to make one final comment, then we can talk about legacy, which I love. I, when it comes to building wealth, you always have this sense that everybody else is further ahead than you. They must be, and or like you're too late. You miss the good boat, right? That the best opportunities were when people got in that before you did. And the reality is that anytime is a good opportunity to get into increasing your financial capacity. And all you actually need is 5 years to completely change your financial trajectory. So if you think you've got 5 years, then you've got an opportunity to completely turn things around. So, I'm in my 40s and I get more people like, oh, I'm in my 40s. I think I missed the boat. I'm like, what? You have 50 more freaking years, if not more, based on life expectancy. So stop crying and get going, right? So I just want to put that out there because it's so easy to scroll Twitter or Instagram or whatever, and you're like, wow, everybody is richer and more beautiful than me. And that's just not true, right? And so let's get going. You got 5 years and you can make it happen.
The if you can increase your wealth, you can have enough to buy unlimited organic blueberries for all
Yes, you
your
can.
blueberry
Yeah,
consumptions.
that's
As we're
right.
talking, I'm drinking a homemade kombucha, blueberry
Okay.
kombucha, thanks to my lovely wife April. So
That's wonderful.
it's a good stuff. Thank you, number one, for being on. It's no, it's clear to me that you speak for a living and that you encourage people, and I'm just really grateful that you came on to share your expertise and wisdom. The way I end this show is talking about legacy, and really the reason, and I don't normally explain this, but we have to think with the end in mind, and the actions that you spend today are going to make a ripple effect whether you live to see it or not. And so the legacy question goes like this: if this was your last day on earth and you were with the people that you love the most, what would you make sure to communicate in that last conversation with them? You can't give them any podcast or book or talk that you've given. You only have that conversation. What would you make sure to highlight in that conversation?
Love. At the end of the day, that's what we have. And sometimes I get asked, like, what do you want to be known for? I want to be known for love, actually. And love permeates everything and makes the world go around. And so that's what I would focus on that last day, is how to be as loving as possible to every human being out there, particularly the ones I disagree with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How do I bring love to that equation?
How do we show more empathy? Is
Yep.
there, I'm sorry, I just want to unpack that a little bit more. What's your definition of love? And you made a comment, even the people that you disagree with, what's a practical way that we can do that?
Yeah. I believe that at the end of the day, everybody's just trying to do the best they can.
Yeah.
And that is the human experience. And if we can relate to people that we disagree with from the perspective of they are doing the very best they can, like us, then it gives us that commonality and that connection once again. So I'll give you a tactical example. I'm working on a project right now where I've got a fair amount of immediate neighbor opposition. They do not like me. And they're very vocal about it. And it has stalled the project in some ways, right? And so it's become a great teacher for me of how, even in the face of adversity like that, do I still love them and feel the common human experience with people who actively oppose me every day. That is my journey, right? As a human, all of us. And so that's where I would leave it, is how do we do that? And there's not a magic answer, but I think it's a mindset around how we think about our fellow human beings.
Brandon Green, thank you. BrandonGreen.com. Go check out and be a part of the community. And thank you for making time to be on the show. I've taken a page of notes and just grateful for how you articulate things, and just excited to see where you go in the future.
Thank you, Caleb. Thanks for having me.